search operators in ways they're not supposed to be used, essentially. You can find this. I have a blog post based on it on steno.ghost.io. But other than that, let's get started. We had some good times last night. Who was here for dual core? Anyone stay for dual core? A couple people? Okay. Responsible afterwards, right? Very responsible. So, Dorking. What is it and how do we use it? So back in the day, there was this protocol called the Web Exclusion Protocol, where it started out saying that Google had scrapers, and that's how Google's search engine works. They send scraper bots out, and they gather the information of the website and put it into their search database. So the way you were supposed to tell bots where they weren't supposed to go was by telling them to disallow them to go there. But the problem with this is that when you put it on your website goes mywebsite.com/robots.txt. That's always going to be there. That's always that site. That's the robots.txt location. So if you put that in there, attackers all of a sudden know where you don't want them to go. On top of that, they also Google's bots happen to index things they're not supposed to index to begin with. So this is part of the OWASP guide, and this is one of the very first things they use. And as you can see there, there's a couple of different search engines you can use. You can go through all of them. Shodan, most of you are probably familiar with that one. Baidu, all that good stuff. So here's a couple of the more common operators that are useful. Quotations, search for the exact phrase. Sites restrict to the site. File types, you can restrict to certain file types. So for instance, if you work with Cisco gear, and you know that the VPN credentials are typically in the PCF file. You can type file type PCF, and then all of a sudden you can find all the publicly available Cisco dumps. All in URL, that restricts it to just in the URL, the pipe operators and or things like that. And then after you do the search, you can also do URL modifiers. So once you get the search, you can copy and paste these in. And so the first one, the QDR, limits by time frame. And if you put in S for second, N for minute, H for hour, stuff like that, it'll restrict it to just the past hour. And then the TBM restricts it to just blogs, apps, images, stuff like that. Literal, no autocorrect, that means you will never get an autocorrect result. And then disabled the personal search. The personalized search lets you know what kind of a bubble you're in. So if you ever want to try to get out of it and see what Google might show you naturally, just paste that in after you already do your search. So there's a couple of use cases, and there was recently, the Yahoo hack was recently supposedly done by a Russian, and one of the ways he did it was identifying web servers with Google. So what can you get? You can get footholds. You can get generic admin login pages. You can find all kinds of stuff like that. You may be able to get credentials from that. The credentials might be reused somewhere else. You can do vulnerability searching. You can go for certain files, certain server types, certain specific versions of server types, things like that. You can get verbose error messages. So if there's a log message that that has just way too much information in it, you can search for that and then find out what people are running using it. You can do it for recon enumeration. And then again, you can find devices on it in a similar way to Shodan too. So this was a recent Airbus support. They were an emergency 9/11 system. And not Dan on Twitter, if you don't follow him, he's a very smart guy. But he basically said, hey, look at this worm support site where all of a sudden when I change my user agent, so I tell Google that I'm no longer me, I'm a bot, all of a sudden I can get their login portal. So the first part, footholds and pivots. You can find file uploads. You can do URL mutations for it too. So let's say these two images here I had were a file upload service that are based on similar underlying frameworks and all that. So I took XU2, and that was in the URL, and then I put, well, maybe they're doing a version number. So I tried XU3, XU1, things like that to try and see if they were older or newer versions of the same thing. So vulnerabilities, again, servers, files, logs, software, login admin portals. You can find crazy amounts of stuff with this. Passwords, database backup files, uploaded files, site scrapes, credentials files. Again, you can find crazy amounts of stuff with this. And one of the best things to do with it is automate it as much as possible. And there's two cool tools for it. There's a bunch of them out there, but Snitch is a cool one. And then what I really like, there's a new one by a guy named Vector, and it's called like DorkNet. And I like it because it allows you not only to use proxies, and it uses Selenium to bypass Google capacitive, and then on top of that, it allows you to import custom lists. Most of them have like pre-built lists. They say, oh, enter this into it, and you'll start searching. Tell us to look for the vulnerable files one. We'll do that. This one lets you import your own. So. All right. So here we are. And now I'm going to show you guys how to change user agents. There's two ways you can do it. You can download a plugin for Chrome called User Agent Changer. And you can literally just go through and tell it. It's a useful developer tool because you can see, oh, well, what does my website look like on all these different devices? And then if you go down, you can start telling it that you're a bot. Now, if you want to do it the manual way because you don't want to rely on a tool, you can bring up the developer tools in Chrome here, go to Network, and then Network Conditions. And then this is usually checked. Select User Agent automatically. If you uncheck it, all of a sudden, you can change it again. Now, keep in mind with that, when you do it, you have to reload the page every time. So every time you do it, it'll only work once, then you have to reload the page, and then it'll go away. But other than that, so here's the Robotstxt for WallStreetJournal.com. And as you can see, here's all the disallow parts they don't want us going to. There's, some of the stuff, the sitemap stuff we're allowed to go to. And we're going to try going to one of them that we're not supposed to go to. So all of a sudden, as you can see, this is a part of their site that you weren't supposed to be able to get to. But yet, we're still getting there without much of a problem, just because we knew where to look. And again, you can do this. Admins will leave admin pages, like the login screens, all kinds of crazy stuff like that. It's so easy to find it. Sometimes it's almost pathetic. All right. So let's start doing some, because this presentation is going to be half just kind of blowing through, giving you the basic information, and the rest actually showing you how to use it. So this dork right here, it takes the quotes and it puts PHP mailer, private mailer, and then it puts the extension and puts for PHP extension. So all of a sudden you can find publicly available versions of this PHP mailer that you might be able to use and abuse. They might have default credentials, stuff like that. And again, for generic footholds, first places you can start getting into, you can try uploading files to their site that, well, maybe shouldn't be there. So all of a sudden, we start going through this, and we start going to this jinkers.org. Oh, okay. So we got PHP errors. So we got line 60s. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see what happens over here in this one. Oh, hey, there's actually two. But yeah, so now I just found a file upload page. I can just upload files to their site. Yeah, that sounds cool, right, guys? Okay. And again, this another one that searches for file uploads. All of a sudden, we're just traversing their directories. Let's see where we can go. And now we can just, you can just do so much recon with this, it's ridiculous. So, this XU2, this is one of the examples I brought up earlier. And it brings us to this, which is the same thing we just found with that generic file upload one. But then if you notice down here, it mentions that extra upload v2. And this is what I was talking about when I said, oh, try looking at different version numbers and enumerating, because if you look at the URL there, it says XU2, extra upload 2. So maybe there's a first version, maybe it's XU1, maybe there's an XU3. Try doing that. You can not only, take these dorks, and these are all publicly available. You can go to exploitdb for the Google Dorking database, and these are all just publicly available ones. So you can create your own out of ones that others have already created for you. And then again, there's, just some of the other ones, XU1, XU3, things like that. And then you can also just try and going back directories. So maybe that dork was just too exclusive. Maybe it excluded some search results. All of a sudden, we go back just, one little directory there, and we're finding, slightly more. We're getting some in different languages. There's only 3 on that first one, so. All right. So now, finding vulnerabilities. This one is a PHP authentication bypass dork. So the second you type it into Google, no, I'm not a robot, believe me. See how good of a robot I not am? Jeez, Google. There you go. No, I am a robot after all. So there's an admin panel for the very first website that comes up, the PHP admin panel, just like that. And again, it searches for one that has a specific known vulnerability. So you can go and look at recent CVEs that are dropped. You can go and look at vulnerabilities from last year, 5 years ago. And if you know what specific one you're looking for, you can just find all the publicly available ones. And then if you're using it on an actual engagement, like with a certain client, you can use the site operator, and then you can do it so that it only affects their site. So you're not searching the whole internet anymore. You're just doing their particular website. So this one, again, talking about looking for very specific versions, by using the in-text modifier there, you can look for the version number 7.32, and that, again, has a specifically known vulnerability. Vulnerable files. So this one here will look for publicly available files that are shared on OneDrive. So if you happen to know that the client you're using uses Microsoft products, they use OneDrive for uploading their files, you can start searching and going through people and see who shared something by accident that they shouldn't have. Maybe there's a password list that IT left somewhere. Maybe some C-level somewhere that has administrative access to the network left their password file on their OneDrive, and now all of a sudden you're just looking for it. So this one is going to look for SSL keys. Okay, so there we are. There's their authorized keys, just like that. That was hard, right? Now this one is going to look for, recently there was a lot of MongoDB instances that were being wiped because they had default credentials, they were left open on the internet, stuff like that. This will specifically look for those types of servers. And there's still more than 10 pages of search results of them. Still publicly available, even after how many of them got hosed? Still there. This one's a really cool one. If you pay attention when you're using any kind of website that you frequent often, you can just say, okay, well, take the way the URL looks, and then this one will look for WordPress backup files that often contain the passwords, the user's credentials in them. And here's a bunch of WordPress sites where we can probably find their credentials, like that. Now this one is a really cool one. This looks for specific versions of OpenSSL that are vulnerable to attack. And this attack, again, known for a long time now, and there's MIT showing up. Really? Okay. Well, So, one more, let's move on to passwords. So, and this is really one of when you're doing the custom tools, the scrapers, the automated part of it, this is one of the cool ones because you can start using it and search password dumps, and you can start thinking, okay, well, maybe I should just scrape these, collect them, collate them, and say, well, okay, what are people's most common passwords that are used so I can increase my hashcat, so that way I have better rainbow tables, stuff like that. That way you can find, the most common passwords. And again, this is looking for anything that has gmail.com and password in it. So this is probably people uploading documents with their own passwords, maybe the whole company's in there. No, that one was crap. It was. This one is a much cooler one. We'll do GitHub. So this is going to search GitHub for publicly available passwords. So it has anything in it, the extension, CSV, and then it has user ID, username, user example, blah, 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 blah. and there's a SCADA password list. So if you want to know the default passwords to any of these vendors' devices, there you go. You just found it. Less than a second. And this one, again, like I was saying before, if you know certain file types that you can search for the dumps of the credentials. So here we are. Let's see what these guys' password is. Let's see if they use a good one. What do you guys think? Do you think they're going to use a good password or like a default or something? Oh, user password equals user password. That sounds like a good one, right? What do you expect when you just found it with Google, you know? Let's see. Let's try to find another one here. Yeah, and again, just user password. But what do you expect, really, to be honest? All right. Let's go back into the end here. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns about the presentation here? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Again, you can literally just go to exploitbb.com, use these publicly available ones, find them, and then use them against anyone. Companies, use them for scraping, for data gathering, whatever you want. So get to Dorking, you dorks. What are you waiting for, right? Yeah. The capacitors? Yeah, and that's actually, I was having a problem installing one of the tools, one of the modules, because I had a demo that I was going to do with one of the newer tools that came out. But the one way you can get around it is that tool uses Selenium, and it uses WebGecko, so it kind of makes its way around it. And you can also, if you can input a proxy list, stuff like that, you can start getting by it through that. Yep. That's unfortunately just going on the history of the product itself. I mean, not really. I mean, what can you do to stop it? The protocol still exists. I mean, it's the only way that Google spiders work. I mean, they would have to change their entire operation, probably. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's unfortunate, but I mean, what are you going to do? Anyone else? All right, well. Thanks for coming, guys. I hope you have a good rest of the day here today.